online with Bilbo Pointer, Executive Director for the Canadian Centre for Investigative Reporting. So I'd like you to start off with a brief description of what it means to be an associate producer.
Well, an associate producer, in many respects, you're sort of the consummate multitasker for the production. Develop the leads for a story, the contact, to set up the interviews and the research toward the production of the story, and in assistance, basically, at the behest of whoever the reporter will be on the story, or the senior producer, or your senior editor, however it's organized. Oftentimes, you will be conducting that level of interviews, so you'll be doing all the pre-interviews and research. Sometimes you'll be conducting interviews that will become the broadcaster on-air interviews, and in fact, that's done a fair amount, and essentially, so you're grabbing the tape or conducting the interviews on air that will then get edited into the final product. In television, you could be organizing the shot list, organizing the dates for shoots and interviews in the field, basically generally coordinating the efforts as you've been tasked on the project, and that's essentially what my experience was.
So you need to be an exceptional multitasker.
I think so. I also was an associate producer for an investigative unit with CBC, and so a lot of what I did was the heavy research, source cultivation. I was relied on less for the technical end of things than others would be, say, in a breaking news environment.
What was your favorite aspect of being an associate producer?
Well, my favorite part was just, basically being able to develop a story organically. And based in what I was doing, I was able to do that. Go from the idea, say I have a contact or someone's got in touch with me and this is, I think, a good story, and to be able to develop that organically and not necessarily be pressed for time because it didn't need to get rushed to air. A lot of it is cultivating relationships, throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. Every day is different. Every minute of every day is different. So,
what are the hardships that these up-and-coming producers will face?
Well, partly I think just the sheer economics of the thing, probably many more associate producers than there are jobs for them. The work is such that you don't necessarily think of yourself as doing any one thing or being any one thing. And then at some point, if you're being mentored at all, if someone's got any interest in you and they think highly of your work, in an environment like the CBC, they'll ask you more or less what you want to do. Do you want to become a senior producer or producer, director? Associate producing it's a position, it's sort of a middle position, right? So, it's a little bit ahead of where you might start, and it's not quite where, for many people, they'll want to stay, especially if it's in a broadcast environment where they're, say, involved in television production in particular.
So what could you tell us about your own productions at the CBC?
A lot of the legwork. You committed some interviews to tape that were used in the final production. So that's a lot of what it was. It was a lot of keeping the files straight for the senior producers I was working with, as well as the on-air talent.
Sounds like fun, actually.
Yeah, well, it can be very rewarding, and especially if you're on the ground floor of an investigation, because you're very much going to be driving what's uncovered. You're sort of utilized in that way.
So let me ask you something, Bilbo. How much formal education came in handy during your time as an associate producer?
Relatively little, and what I mean by that is, honestly, technically, I'm not the most technically proficient out framing the shots and basically shooting and
so the compositional principles behind it.
Yeah, there were others that excelled at that. What I was driven by was the getting the story, the getting the sources. So there was a grounding in it. I got to learn the sort of terminology and my way around broadcast environment or a newsroom.
Very important.
In terms of the schooling. But really, what I then developed, curiosity in things and, networks and connections. So that's going to be the thing that will propel most people, I think, to quite frankly, be aggressive and passionate about things, too.
So I'm going to switch topics just a little bit for a second.
Sure.
In 2006, the CBC was federally funded just north of $1 billion, and it generated another $53 million from other revenue sources. In your opinion, has the Internet had any or much of an impact on those numbers, or has the CBC compensated for the new medium? And if so, in what ways?
I think probably the biggest issue for CBC in terms of funding isn't necessarily the marketplace, but really the levels it can expect and commitments it can expect from government. The CBC has compensated to a great degree about being in the media marketplace, and their online is a significant part of what they do now. Now they've got plans for a new digital service, and So I think that they've been able to basically keep pace with the changing media landscape. But, at the end of the day, the largest component of their revenue is dependent on
federal
what
funding.
the government, of what the government of the day thinks of it. And as we
Yeah.
know, that is a fairly volatile environment that they would find themselves in now. And so I know it drives a lot of the decisions there. And I know that only because I still interact with a number of people that are CBC lifers.
Do you have any final pearls of wisdom for the up-and-coming media producers?
Be prepared to be multimedia practitioners, and probably will find that you'll have to file in 3 different mediums at any one time. At least be comfortable enough in that. Keep plugging, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there's all sorts of people that could produce technically competent work. It's really, if you're in the news business, then it's about the ideas. And
Awesome.
So that's what I would recommend, is having that be the priority.
Well, on behalf of Montrealites and the Department of Communication Studies at Concordia University, I'd like to thank you for your time, Bilbo.
Oh, no worries. It's been fun.